Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cafecito and Money Talk, the segment where we empower your financial future starting today. On today's episode, we're going to have a returning guest. Some of you might remember him, some of you who are just tuning in. Well, let's get to know him right now. Sir, would you like to go ahead and reintroduce yourself and introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me back. My name is Javier Saborio. I am the Vice President of Retail for Power Financial Credit Union.
Well, Javier, thank you for stopping by again. On today's episode, we're going to be covering a topic that hopefully more than likely you are very familiar with. It's going to be on breaking the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. So let me start by asking you, how does somebody find themselves in that position? How do they get stuck? Like, is it because I imagine, I've been through it, and looking back, I can't. Yeah. So how do most people end up in that position?
So it could be multiple ways. It could be you can lose your job, maybe an illness, and you had an emergency fund that was not sufficient, and then you found yourself spending the money and then maybe some additional money in the way of credit cards or loans, and then your liabilities are just so high that you can meet your bills. Mm-hmm. Also, it could be kind of self-inflicted by just spending, poor money management, poor decisions.
Which is kind of the conundrum I found myself in. That's how I got into mine. So now, what are some steps you would recommend to kind of break yourself and free yourself of the paycheck to paycheck cycle?
Right. So absolutely. So the first thing you want to focus on is growing the gap between your income and your expenses. You want to be able to, at first, push your expenses down so much so that you can breathe and get ahead on your bills and also save. But if all your money's coming in and going out immediately, in essence, your checking account becomes like a transfer account. It comes in and goes to bills. You won't be able to.
Well, and that's kind of the crutch that people kind of lean on is the core bills, because I mean they make up pretty much all our expenses, especially like once you look at as soon as the first day of the month rolls around, it's like, oh, I have to worry about my bills, and it's natural, but. You're absolutely right. There are options to lower them. You could call in and whatnot.
So you bring an excellent point. You're going to have some fixed expenses and some variable expenses. The fixed expenses you can lower, but it's going to be a long-term process. But your variable expenses, you can definitely have an impact right away.
Yeah, the variable expenses being things like phone bill, cable bill, internet,
eating out, going out, groceries.
Well, those seem. I feel like I would put those in like a category all on their own, just because I mean most people feel like some of those other bills, like they're more of a necessity, but they're still changeable.
Yes.
Like you could call in and get a better deal on your cable bill. Right. You could check in on different promotions for your phone bill, water bill. You could do things to lower a water and a light bill. Rent, if you could renegotiate your terms with a landlord, or
if you can lower your light bill, call me. I need it.
Oh,
if you know the secret. But yes, there's things you can do.
So yeah, and of course you started to touch on a very important thing, is like those kind of variable leisure expenses, because most of us, we don't really account for those, but during the moment it's like, and we look back, it's like, wow, did I really spend this amount Friday night?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So when we think of our expenses and we look at the money we make and we get into additional expenses or monthly debt service, we always say we make this much and we spend this much, but we're thinking of housing, transportation, and debt service. But we never think, I still got to buy insurance. I still have to go to the supermarket every week. Absolutely. I still have to pump gas. Those are the things that we neglect to take into account when we budget. There. But we have to. They're, in a way, they're fixed expenses too, because you can't live without them.
Exactly.
But you can have an impact by lowering them or staying away from those activities that cause you to spend that money.
Absolutely. So, all right. So you evaluate yourself. You evaluate your situation where you could lower. You take these steps.
Yes.
what would be an effective way of doing that? Of course, a budget.
Right. So the first step would be to have a budget. Here at Power Financial Credit Union, we have a budgeting tool that helps you see where your money is going. It actually automatically puts it into categories, and you can see how much is going to housing, to transportation, education, clothing, eating out. And then you can have a general idea of how much you're spending and where your money is going. Ideally, you want to do a very detailed budget in which you actually tell your money where to go. So let's say if you notice you're just going out every weekend and you're spending $100
accounting for that leisure.
Yeah, you may want to say, hey, you know what? Once you find out how much you're really spending, you can put things into perspective and say, going out is really not worth $750 every month, you know. Because when you do a budget, you'll find out that you're spending a lot of money.
I thought spending $100 every week was a lot. It's 150.
Hopefully it's just 100, but people spend a lot of money.
My goodness.
You know, there's,
So okay, so there's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. It's doable. You can do it, especially if you have the discipline and kind of change the habits and fix the areas where you could fix. Now, say for the people who are able to get out of it, how do you go about staying out of it?
Right.
Like keeping yourself from going back into the paycheck to paycheck cycle. What advice would you give to those people?
Absolutely. So you want to get ahead as much as possible, meaning you want to grow that gap between your income and your expenses. And you can do that by cutting down on bills, or you can make extra income. Yes, a second job. So that would be one way to create a cushion enough so that you are completely a month ahead on your bills, and you can actually, you can actually pay your bills when they're due. But the key is to do your budget and to take into account all the expenses that are coming due. Right now, we have the holiday season coming up, and you're going to go to a lot of events. You're going to have to buy gifts for your family and your friends and coworkers. So if you didn't budget for it, for example, you will find yourself charging it, and then you're creating liabilities into the next year. So the way to avoid that is to look ahead 2 to 3 months. And the more you budget, the better you'll get at doing that.
Absolutely. And of course, not just kind of future planning, but also planning for the situations that you can't foresee. And you touched a little bit on that during the segment where we talked about crushing debt.
Right.
There's sometimes surprise expensive, like a broken car, hospital bills.
Yeah,
you have to account for like those unexpected things. Now I kind of want to touch on something else. What advice would you give to parents or the younger audience who really don't have, like a person like me? I didn't grow up with much financial advice from my parents, so I kind of like learned as I went and as I grew. What advice would you give parents to give to their children to keep them from falling into the paycheck to paycheck cycle?
Right. So the biggest impact we can have in that sense is to show the value of money. That money is not an unlimited resource, and that if you don't have it, you can always save to eventually get it. So I have 2 kids. One of them is not old enough to work yet. So when he gets his allowance, he can spend his money. But if he wants something that's more than his allowance, he has to earn it or save it. And then that way, they understand that it's just not unlimited resources. And the lesson behind it is to delay gratification, because then they'll become that adult who will say, hey, you know what? I don't have it right now. I need to save up for it. I know I have a credit card that I can use, but then I'm going to have to make payments, and it's going to cost me way more if I charge it now than if I buy it next week or the following week or even in 2-3 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is good advice. And I wish somebody
right
would have told me that, because I thought my mom's pockets were bottomless,
unlimited,
endless.
right?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
all think that, and when they say no, we just think they don't want to give it to us. But if we explain what's happening, not necessarily have to disclose this is how much money I make, what have you, if you don't want to have that conversation, but you can definitely teach the principle of this is how much money we can spend on this and why. And a way to teach them is to basically have them use a bank account. Here at Power Financial, we have a teen account that teenagers can use, and you can put their allowance into it, and then they get their own debit card that they can use. And that way, they can experience what it is to spend your own money.
Absolutely. I mean, with that being said, I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry for everything I put you through in regards to spending
one way
all
to
your money.
apologize is to pay back.
Yeah. I think that's all the time we have for today. Javier, thank you for stopping in. Again, really appreciate all the information you gave once again. Great. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
To all the viewers at home, thank you very much for tuning in once again. If you have any questions in regards to today's topic, or if you're seeking any advice or any recommendations to try to get, if you're in the paycheck to paycheck cycle, feel free to reach out. We have Javier here. You're open to
absolutely, yes.
Right?
No, of course. Yeah.
So he's open to help you out, give any advice that we can.
And we have a team of trusted advisors at the credit union that
absolutely.
their sole purpose is to help our members, live better lives today and for all generations to come. And that includes getting out of debt and, to live better.
Absolutely. So, and also if you have any questions in regards to any financial topics, feel free to ask those too. That's what we're here for, to empower your financial future starting today. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been Cafecito and Money Talk. We'll see you next time.